Environment and Engineering Strategic Policy Committee, which recently set up a working group on climate change and how Dublin City Council and the role that local authorities have in actually tackling climate change. And the working group has just very recently, it's almost hot off the press, produced this document which is called Climate Change Strategy for Dublin City, and some of you may be familiar with it, but if you're not, I would very much urge you to get a copy of it. You can download it from the Dublin City Council website. It's a consultation document, and submissions will be received up until the 21st of February. So it is something that we in the Labour Party will be working on, and I've spoken to Liz, and I think that the proceedings today will actually feed into our submissions on this document as well. So just to bear that in mind, that your contributions today do actually go places, and they will impact on Dublin City or on Labour Party policy, but that they will also be fed into local authorities that are looking at the issue of climate change as well, and they will be able to feed them through all of the local authorities in that way, through all of our councillors on all of the councils.
I would like to welcome you all here today to the Mansion House. I hope that today's forum on climate change is informative, interesting and challenging. Climate change is recognised as the greatest threat to the planet. It is humankind's greatest threat, greatest challenge. There is strong scientific evidence that the warming of the climate system due to human-induced emissions is unequivocal. Major reductions in emissions of the greenhouse gases throughout the world are now an accepted priority in nearly all countries. Ireland must face up to these challenges. The National Forum on Climate Change seeks to engage with relevant stakeholders and the public to debate what measures Ireland needs to take to meet our greenhouse gas reduction obligations. Public engagement and discourse is essential to this issue. We must change mindsets and tackle these challenges head-on. In order to achieve our global emission targets, we need cooperation and clear direction. Unite for Our Planet is a Labour Party initiative to address climate change. And I want to thank our TDs, our senators, and certainly Councillor Costello, who is pushing this.
We have increasing carbon emissions in the atmosphere since we signed the Kyoto Protocol, and a big part of the reason for that is because the government hasn't given this issue the urgency it should have, and it hasn't had the type of integrated approach that we feel should be there. And what has given rise to our, obviously one of the reasons we've had a growth of emissions over the years is because we've had economic growth, but that hasn't been clean growth, and it is the government that is largely responsible for that, and particularly the government that has been there for the last 10 years. And the other side of it is that it is our huge responsibility will go with our developer-led planning, which has been permitted over the years and driven, in fact, by the government.
Tackling climate change is the greatest challenge facing the human race at the present time, and possibly one of the greatest ever. What do we need to do? We need to develop new technologies. We need to devise ways and means of delivering those technologies. We need to transform our lifestyles, individually and collectively. And it is also at the same time a great moral challenge. We have a responsibility, I think, to bequeath to other generations that follow us a planet that is in no less bad shape than the one which we inherited. We have a responsibility, I think, to the regions that will be the first and worst affected by climate change, which, of course, interestingly, are amongst the poorest regions of the world, particularly in Africa. And we have a responsibility, I suppose, in common to protect our own species and all the other species with whom we share this planet. So in summary, when you look at it, climate change, or global warming, is simultaneously a challenge which is technological, political, economic, moral, international, intergenerational, personal, as well as societal.
Really the twin challenges in the energy area. One is tackling climate change, but the other is the whole issue of energy security of the future, and the fact that we are overly dependent on fossil fuels that come very often from parts of the world that aren't exactly secure themselves. And there is one clear message: we cannot depend on market forces to tackle either of these issues, in fact. We need to have a response that is global, collective and political. And I want to echo a point that Joanna's made. Many people wonder, what are politicians for? And sometimes you can understand their questioning. But there is no more central political issue than this. This is what politicians are for, to work collectively across the globe to tackle an issue that is going to, and is affecting us all, and is going to increasingly affect us all. So we have to get our act together, and obviously in the energy area that is particularly so. We have to ensure that our supplies in some way are secure, because 90% of our energy comes from imported fossil fuels at the moment. That's severe, extreme overdependence.
We all accept that agriculture is a major consumer of fuel supplies. We accept that it's a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So our challenge is how to minimise that fuel consumption and how to minimise those emissions. They say necessity is the mother of all inventions. Well, for us, there's some key questions that we need to address, such as how do we make it more economically beneficial for the agricultural sector to become more energy efficient? How can we encourage more innovation so that we get lower emissions of greenhouse gases such as methane? How can we encourage more afforestation so that we can soak up some of the carbon dioxide produced by agriculture? And how can we encourage the use of more fuel-efficient fuels, such as perhaps using some biofuels?
The challenge that faces us in relation to combating carbon emissions from transport is daunting, and it's one in which I think Joanna is correct in saying we need a very striking leadership by government, whether they're Green ministers or not. Clearly the government has to take a very strong role. And we feel in the Labour Party that undoubtedly the central plank of creating a sustainable economy, a sustainable transport system is public transport, is the development of public transport. And I noted, of course, recently at a Dáil, the Oireachtas Committee on Transport, that Dublin Bus still receives just about the lowest subvention by any of our European partner countries for their public service bus companies. We're way down at the bottom of the list that I think ranges from something like 70% subvention in places like Luxembourg and Denmark, down to ourselves with just under 28%. So clearly there hasn't been a commitment, I think, in public policy to supporting public transport and to resolving some of the major problems that exist with public transport. And this is shown most graphically of all in this government, which is now 8 months old and which has been promising for the past 4 or 5 years that we'd have a Dublin Transport Authority. Mark McCullen, the previous Minister for Transport, said that the Dublin Transport Authority bill was imminent and legislation would come before the Dáil about 3 years ago. 3 years on and 8 months into this government, this Fianna Fáil Green PD government, independent government, we're still waiting for the Dublin Transport Authority, and key decisions in relation to the rollout of buses and public transport infrastructure cannot happen apparently until we have this legislation passed.